Okay, what I'll try to do is to really give an overview of the global situation of the nuclear industry, to define the status where it comes from, and to give an idea where it might go. But I think there's a lot of crystal ball analysis in this field that looks into the future with some very uncertain sort of projections. And I think it's very healthy to first look where it comes from and where it currently states. So first of all, here we have the reactor startups, which in our definitions are grid connections. In green, in red, we have the shutdowns. And we see very easily that we had two big waves of startups, the first one in the 70s, next one in the 80s, and then there's rather a flat development with not much happening. In a cumulated manner, this looks like this. So we had an increase of the numbers of reactors in operation, which was uninterrupted until the end of the 1980s, and from then on a pretty flat situation. This orange line here is the installed capacity, which doesn't really have exactly the same shape as the numbers of units. That is because units starting up were generally larger than units that have been taken off the grid. So the capacity increased in spite of the fact that the numbers of reactors didn't increase anymore. The second reason is that a lot of reactors have undergone what is called uprating. So by technical means, it's increasing the installed capacity of existing reactors. So the overall historic peak of the numbers of reactors was reached 10 years ago in 2002. The current number of reactors, which we give here, takes into account in Japan 10 reactors at Fukushima taken off the grid. Officially, the Japanese government only took 4 reactors off the grid. So officially, there's still 50 reactors in operation in Japan. However, as you probably know, there's currently only 2 reactors that are generating electricity. All the others are off the grid. How many might restart is a matter of speculation. It's very difficult to get an idea. We did several scenarios. Whatever is the scenario, the order of magnitude, what we have now is around 400 units in operation in the world, which brings us back to the late 1980s. That's the basic message. Now, if we're looking at the age pyramid, it's obvious that in the absence of significant new build programs, the age is increasing every year. The current average age of the nuclear fleet in the world is 27 years, and we see how the waves, the startup waves from the 70s and from the 80s are moving towards the 40-year operational lifetime. There is now 155 units that have been operating for over 30 years. That's a pretty long time. I don't know whether you remember the cars that were on the streets 30 years ago, but they looked a little different from today's cars. So, I mean, technology-wise, this is not really a brand new technology. And again, the average age is now standing at 27 years. There's 20 reactors that are now over 40 years in operation. If we have a quick look at the situation, the same kind of pattern in the European Union, 27 countries of the European Union, we'll see the same sort of rise of the programs until the end of the 1980s without any interruption. But then we see that the historic peak was already reached then. It never reached any higher level then. And today's numbers of reactors in operation is 45 units less than at the peak. 45 less. So keep that in mind if we're reading in the newspaper that there's one reactor under construction in Finland and another one in France as new construction sites. This doesn't change anything of the overall trend, which has been in decline for a long time. We've seen numbers of reactors, installed capacity. We have here now the production of nuclear electricity, which has increased until 2006. It peaked in 2006. And the other curve is the orange line is the share of nuclear power in the overall electricity mix. And it's already, we did this year, this is an annual report, and we've done this for the first time as a long-term assessment, and we were actually surprised to find that the peak share of nuclear power in the global electricity mix was already reached in 1993. So it's been going downhill, slowly, but surely for a long time. The effect of Fukushima at the end is only sort of an acceleration of that long-term trend. So we're standing currently somewhat at around 11%, and the electricity generation was in 2011 less than 5% less than when it peaked. Who is generating nuclear electricity? 31 countries. The first thing that is striking in this slide is that we're not talking about a phenomenon that is spread out over the world, right? It's a phenomenon that is very much concentrated on a very small number of countries. Like the big six, US, France, Russia, Japan, South Korea, and Germany have been generating between 2/3 and 3/4 of nuclear electricity for the past years. If you just take the two largest nuclear generators, the US and France, they produce about half of all nuclear electricity in the world. One country, France, generates about half, just under half, 49% in 2011, of all nuclear electricity in the EU. So it's not something that is spread out sort of equally throughout the world. It's very much concentrated. Also, if you look at the size of the countries, it doesn't play a role. If you look like, for example, Belgium is generating more nuclear electricity than India, right? It's not really the same size of countries. Or you have Ukraine generating more electricity than China. So sometimes it's a lot smaller countries that generate a lot more electricity. Now, if one tries to get sort of an idea where this is going, the first thing to look at, obviously, is reactors under construction. This is the development of units that have been listed as under construction. I'm insisting on listed as under construction because if a unit is listed as under construction, it doesn't mean yet that it actually gets at some point connected to the grid. A lot of projects have been interrupted at some point in various stages of advancement of construction. Some power plants have been actually completed and have never been put into operation. So if we look at historically, we had the peak in the late 1970s, but a lot of those 48 of that 234 reactors actually never made it to the grid. That's a significant share, right? I mean, it's not just an insignificant number of units. By the way, the last ones that had that kind of fate are two Bulgarian reactors that have been listed as under construction for 25 years. So since 1987, they were in the listing as under construction, but they never made it to the grid. And they were taken off the listing earlier this year. So it's a phenomenon that continues. Now, who is building? It's really only one major builder. That is China, with 26 units under construction at the same time currently. That is roughly 40% of all units under construction in the world. Significant other players are Russia and India, Russia with 10 and India with 7. Only South Korea has another 3 in the listing. All the other countries have 2 at the most under construction, listed as under construction. The other column, which is interesting, is construction start. As I said earlier, you get some interesting dates here. 1985 as a construction start. 85, 1999, 86, 87, 81. The record holder is in the US. That's a plan called WATSPAR 2 that has, well, originally was where construction started in 1972. That's probably historic record for a long time. I mean, it's kind of difficult to imagine anybody, another country, meeting that. What is rather surprising is that even now, this startup date is already outdated. Like, the current projection is either 2015 or 2016. So after all those years, the industry has been showing incapable of planning on budget and time over, just for the actually accomplishment, the finishing of the nuclear reactor projects. Now, we did look at the evolution of reactor building times. And what we did here is we calculated the average construction time per year. And the size of the balls is indicating the number of reactors that have started up in a given year. And it's very interesting because, as you can see, there is a pattern until the end of the 1980s. The pattern was like rather comparable numbers of units coming online, but an clearly increasing trend in construction times. Construction times have a huge impact, obviously, on cost, because the largest share of a nuclear power project cost is financing costs. Now, if you double construction times, this has a phenomenal impact on overall costs. So this development, this continuous increase of average construction times, has very much to do with the overall increase in costs. After the 1980s, it's like an explosion, right? I mean, there's no rule to the game anymore. It's like a lot of smaller balls, because as we've seen, I mean, there's only few units that actually started up. But, you can jump from very high, like in 2010, the average of 7 reactors, the average was around 14 years. In 2012, there's only 2 reactors in the world that started up. Both were in South Korea, and the average time is 4.4 years, which is phenomenal. It is not so clear why that is. I mean, nobody can really explain. I'm still waiting for a good analysis. Is why are the South Koreans such a very unusual performance in that area? I don't have the answer. But it really is, it's only the exceptions that we've seen in the past were the Japanese and the South Koreans. Another factor which is important to look at if one wants to get an idea of the overall trends is we have a lot of debates about how long these reactors might operate. 40 years, 50 years, some people say 60. I've even read now that some say 80 years. Of course, nobody really knows, as we've seen, that there is no real industrial experience for the ones that are in operation. So we thought we look at the average age of reactors that have been already shut down. And it's surprising to find out that the average age of shutdown reactors is actually lower than the ones that are in operation currently. And the industrial experience of long operation times is very low. I mean, there's only a small number of units that have actually operated beyond 40 years. And most of them have been plutonium production reactors. So it's kind of difficult to compare those with, operational conditions of a large commercial reactor. Now, a few brief comments on economics. These are what is commonly termed technology learning curves. I'm not interested in the figures. I'm interested in the shape of the curves. And they're very, very simple and very straightforward. with experience, whether it's photovoltaics, I mean, those are technology curves, obviously, for renewable energy technologies, whether it's PV or concentrating solar or geothermal or wind, we always get a shape that is like this, right? So it's with time, overall costs go down. These are production costs, but it's similar to installed capacity costs. If we look at the learning curves for nuclear power plants, it's the opposite. So you get negative learning curves. One of the reasons we have seen is the construction times that has actually the same kind of shape. This is the case of the US reactor fleet. The US has a huge advantage that it's much more making information available of that sort. So there's a very detailed economic assessment of the investment costs for each single reactor in the US fleet. Those are projections for future projects. Those are reactors that are not online yet, but you can see when the industry started talking about this renaissance 10 years ago, the projections were very low as cost per installed kilowatt. And as soon as detailed engineering started, the cost projections skyrocketed. By the way, people might think that France must be a lot better because they have a standardized program, because they had the optimum situation for nuclear industry development, complete, total commitment by the government to support the industry. But in fact, the latest reactor has also been the most expensive one, and the overall shape of the development of costs is very similar to the U.S. situation. When we look at, this is the last one that was put into operation. If we look at projected costs, we looked historically what the cost assessment was for the EPR, the European Pressurized Water Reactor. And so we took only official French sources, either government, utility, or builder, over the last 10 years. And it's staggering, even if you deflate to 2012 euros, the current estimate is over a factor of 4 higher than the original estimates. Now, this is not just a detail. It's very important because those original estimates are actually decision-making tools, right? I mean, they led, these projections, cost estimates, led to the decision-making to actually invest into an EPR. Whereas currently, the current estimates, because none of these reactors is online, so nobody knows yet what the final cost will be, is over a factor of 4 higher. One analysis which we did for the first time this year is we were interested in how the stock prices developed by large nuclear companies. So what we did is we took a selection of the main large players here, and we compared it with the Financial Times Stock Exchange Index, because obviously you have to put it against an index. It doesn't make any sense to just take the absolute figures because all the companies, large companies, have suffered in the economic crisis. However, if you follow the gray line, which is the stock index, it's now basically back up to the situation where it was 5 years ago. This is starting early 2007. If we look at the utilities or other nuclear companies, the blue line is TEPCO. It's not surprising that TEPCO, that was the operator of the Fukushima site, lost about 94% of its stock value. But it's significant because it was considered a very safe investment. You know, a lot of people, even modest people, had invested in TEPCO stocks because it was considered safe. It wasn't high dividends, but it was a secure investment. Those people lost their money. What is more surprising, though, is to find large companies like Areva, that is the largest nuclear builder in the world, that lost up to 88% of its stock value since 2007. EDF actually plunged again recently, and last week has hit the bottom, which is 85% below its peak. But the other element which is important here is it's not, you see that it's this kind of decline tendency was not triggered by Fukushima at all, besides for TEPCO. It existed for a long time. So this industry was in crisis before Fukushima. Obviously that didn't help, but it's not that this disaster has actually triggered that. So it is clear that even large French banks that have historically been involved in financing of nuclear projects are shying away from nuclear investments, basically for two reasons. One, it's considered too risky, and the second one is they don't even know how much the investment will cost. Like the economic, if you want to lend money and you don't really know in the end what will be the final bill, then it's kind of a difficult investment decision to be made by a banker. The other criteria we looked at is credit rating. This is Standard & Poor's, and it's on the same kind of selection of large nuclear companies. Standard & Poor's highest rating is AAA. There's no AAA, but there was a AA, which was TEPCO prior to the disaster in 2011. And which is another indicator that it was considered an incredibly safe, secure investment also by the credit rating agency. Now, some of the utilities and nuclear companies remained stable over that time, and some of them went really down in the credit rating and are on the lower end. And it's staggering to see Arriva now just one notch off junk. Right? If you look at in the global note, it's BBB minus, which is just one notch off junk. This is the largest nuclear builder in the world. It has full support of the French government, and still it's not considered whether significantly credit worthy by the credit rating agency. On the other hand, it's remarkable to see that decisions where companies are actually pulling out of nuclear, which is the case for German utilities inside and outside the country, but it's also true for the largest electronics company, Siemens. It's considered by the credit rating agencies as credit positive. I have a lot of other slides which we can come back to a couple of them in the discussion, but I want to just conclude here. Basically, the overall role of nuclear power is limited. 11% of commercial electricity, roughly 5%, less than 5% now commercial primary energy, and less than 2% of final energy in the world. And it's quite clear that this situation will rather go towards a decline than an increase. Fukushima didn't help. It vastly increases costs, safety insurance financing, and other problems, like public opinion in many countries. It's clear that the prospects for nuclear power, even over the longer term, have been diminishing with the events in Fukushima. And as we've shown in another part of this report, which looks at the comparison between investments into renewables and nuclear, one can expect rather higher levels of penetration of renewables versus nuclear power in the future. Thank you very much.